Yo, it's Kim, and the holiday season is upon us, which means there's some amazing deals out there. But before you spend all your money on camera gear, pause. This one's for you. So a lot of buyer's guides mostly only care about the price and don't give you enough context about the gear itself. Can it do what you need it to do? So today we're gonna fix that. Here's 5 Micro Four Thirds bodies I think you should check out for the holiday season. So the first is the EM10 Mark III. So this is a lower mid-range camera. It's got 16 megapixels and it's got a great build for a camera of this price. It's not weather sealed and it's not a groundbreaking sensor. It's definitely an incremental upgrade from the last generation, but it's got a small form factor, and this is amazing because if you go any smaller, usually you have to compromise with the buttons and dials, but with the EM10 Mark III, you don't really compromise with any buttons or dials at all, so this makes it a perfect travel camera as well. It's also got good image quality and it's got 16 megapixels, which isn't too different in my opinion to the 20 megapixel sensor, and you're also paying a lot less. And that's a great deal. But you may want to skip this camera if you want an even smaller body like the GX850 from Panasonic. That's definitely smaller, but you are definitely making the sacrifice with the buttons and dials. You may also want to skip this camera if you want a larger camera body like the Lumix G7 or the GH5. And lastly, you may want to skip this camera if you want to do video or you want to do some hybrid shooting with photos and videos. So who should be buying this camera? Well, there's actually quite a big range of people that could be buying this camera. It can include beginner photographers, it can include pros that want a smaller body, a cheaper body. It can also include anybody that wants a nice travel camera. So there's currently a $200 discount on it, so it's selling for $600, and if any of the factors I mentioned earlier are attractive to you, this is the camera to buy. Save the $200, spend it on a lens, you won't be disappointed. Moving on to the next camera, which is the Lumix G7. Now this is a 3-year-old camera. It's in the lower mid-range and it's got 16 megapixels. It doesn't have the best build, but it's light and solid enough, and it's also not weather sealed. So why would you buy a 3-year-old camera? Well, honestly, there's a lot of reasons. This camera is pretty good at video, so if you're getting into video, this is a great first camera, but it's not just for beginners, because this can fit seasoned pros, especially if they're using more expensive Panasonic cameras. This would be a great B or C camera just because of the image quality you can get out of such an affordable camera. Or you may want a hybrid camera for both stills and video. This is gonna do it just fine. Or you want a mid-sized camera with a decent grip, or you just want the best bang for your buck. This camera will do it. However, there are some reasons you may want to skip this camera. The first being that it doesn't have IBIS, and that's becoming pretty standard across a lot of cameras these days. But if you're using a gimbal, if you're using tripods, then that should be fine. Another reason you may want to skip this camera is just the build quality. It is a little plasticky, it is a little light, but honestly, it's never bothered me, and in fact, I prefer to use this over my G85 when I'm out and about and I'm not on serious projects, just because it's lighter and it's less of a headache to take around. The last reason you may want to skip on this camera is the video autofocus. Now, video autofocus on most Panasonic cameras and Olympus cameras aren't that great at all, but if you can learn to work around that, then this camera is going to be just fine. So who should be buying this camera? Again, this appeals to quite a wide range of people. It could be anywhere from beginners to professionals looking for B or C cameras, or part-time filmmakers like myself to use as a B camera, or even just anybody looking for a mid-sized body in the Micro Four Thirds lineup with a nice grip. So is this a good holiday season buy? It normally retails for around $500 to $600 these days, and it's not 100% necessary to buy now because it's selling for around $500. But you will at least save $100 if you get it now. So that's not a bad deal at all. It comes with a kit lens as well. Personally though, if you're just getting started, there's not a lot of ways you can better spend $500 on any filmmaking gear, so highly consider this camera. Just remember you need to work around the autofocus. Moving on to the next camera, which is a 2-year-old camera. It's a higher mid-range camera. It's got 16 megapixels with no anti-aliasing filter. It's got a solid build and it's weather sealed. So why would you want to buy this camera? Well, honestly, this is more of a niche camera just because of all the other things in the market. So the first reason is maybe you want IBIS. Secondly, you want that weather sealing. And third, you just want a cheaper A cam and aren't willing to spend it on any more expensive camera bodies. Just a note about the IBIS, it does change the way that you shoot in terms of video. There's a lot of things that I can handhold on the G85, which I couldn't do on the G7. If you're a beginner, I still recommend you go with the G7. You're saving around $300 still, which is a significant amount of money. and it'll also teach you good technique in stabilizing your camera. So G7 is still a better buy. The G85 is definitely more of a niche. So some of the reasons you may want to skip this camera is that firstly, it only has one card slot. If you're going to make this your A cam, you're definitely going to have to live with that risk. The second thing is that you can't shoot higher than 60 FPS for video. And the third thing is that it's kind of in no man's land given the market situation at the moment. You can almost get the same image quality with the G7. In fact, you can hardly tell them apart. And then you can also get better features on the bigger Panasonic bodies by paying just that little bit more. So it's definitely in the middle. So there's only two types of people that I think should be buying this camera. And first, it's the people that want to save as much money on camera bodies and spend it on lenses. And secondly, professionals that want a B or C camera with IBIS. So is this a good holiday season buy? Well, normally it sells for around $800 and now it's currently on for $800. It's honestly worth it if you're looking to save the money. But remember, it does have its limitations. It is in no man's land, and you're probably better off buying a cheaper camera or investing in a more expensive camera. Moving on to the next camera, which is the Lumix G9. Now this is a fairly new camera, and it's a pro or a semi-professional camera. It's got 20 megapixels and it's got a very good build, and it's weather sealed. So why would you want to buy this camera? Well, it's honestly the best photographic camera, I think, on Micro Four Thirds at the moment. The EM10 II is a close competitor, but it's also selling for $200 more. But the G9 is ahead of that camera in terms of features just because it's so much newer. The G9 can also do 20 FPS in burst mode. It can also do 4K 60 and 180 frames per second in 1080p. Those are things that you just can't get in many other cameras. So why would you want to buy this camera? Well, honestly, this is probably the best stills camera in the Micro Four Thirds lineup right now. Its closest competitor is the EM10 Mark II, and that is a 2 or 3 year old camera now. It's just about to get updated. Do not buy that camera. It's also $200 more expensive than the G9 right now. Another reason you may want to pick this camera up is the 20 FPS in burst mode, 4K 60, and 180 frames per second in 1080p for video mode. And lastly, you may want to pick this camera up because it's a higher end camera with a lower end camera price tag. So there's only a couple of reasons you may want to skip the G9, and that includes you need more advanced capabilities, things like 10-bit or 4K 60 beyond 10 minutes of recording. You're going to need to step up to the GH5 for that. And also if you want a smaller camera like the G7 or maybe like the Olympus EM10 Mark III or an even smaller camera, this is definitely not your camera because this body is pretty beefy. Not as big as, say, a Nikon D850 or a 5D Mark IV, but this is still a pretty big camera. But honestly, this appeals to a lot of people, so who should be buying this? Anybody that can afford it, that doesn't mind the larger body, and also wants the best photographic camera in the Micro Four Thirds lineup. This is your camera. So is this a good holiday season buy? Well, it was released for $1,700 and now it's only $1,300. So this is a major discount. 100% resounding yes. I am backing this camera if you want the best photographic camera and don't mind the larger body. This is the camera that you want. And even for people that need a little bit of video capabilities, this is going to shoot video just as well as your G7, your G85, and maybe even better because you get the variable frame rates. So this is 100% the camera that I would recommend people buy if they can afford it for this holiday season. Now moving on to the last camera, which is the Lumix GH5. It's a 2-year-old camera. It's a professional or semi-professional camera. It's got a 20 megapixel sensor and it's got a very good build and it's weather sealed, just like the G9. So why would you buy this camera? Well, first of all, it's legendary in terms of video. You probably already know that watching this video. It can do things like 4K 60, 10-bit, and all these variable frame rates. And also, it's a good hybrid camera for photos and videos. There's 3 reasons you may want to skip this camera. First of all, the camera body is quite large for a mirrorless camera. Compared to Sony's A7 series, the GH5 is actually larger. Secondly, you may not want all the advanced video capabilities. You may not need it. And thirdly, maybe you want faster burst speeds, in which case I'd turn you to the Lumix G9. So there's 2 groups of people that should be looking into this camera. Anybody that's looking for a serious video camera, so filmmakers, part-time filmmakers that are looking to go full-time, this is the camera for you. Secondly, hybrid shooters. This is a great camera for shooting both video and stills. So is this a good holiday season buy? Well, it started at $2,000 when it was released. It normally sells for around $1,700 these days. But for the holiday season, it's $200 off, so it's at $1,500. I highly recommend you pick up this camera for the holiday season just because it normally sells for $1,500 on the used market, so why not get it new? And secondly, you're basically almost getting a cinema level camera for $1,500. This is a bargain at any day and would have been unthinkable just 2 years ago. So an amazing camera for this price, highly recommend it. So there are other Micro Four Thirds cameras out there that are worth buying. These are just the cameras that I've personally used and recommend, but there are other cameras out there. This isn't a be all and all list. Also, I'm trying something new. There are affiliate links down below. I've never done this before. And honestly, even if you aren't buying camera gear, use those links. I think it helps support the channel. It won't charge you anything extra, don't worry, but it does give us a small kickback, and hopefully that'll help support the channel. Anyway, I hope this video helped you in your buying decision and give you more context about the gear itself and whether the holiday deals are worth it or not. Now this was part 1 for Micro Four Thirds bodies. Join me again in part 2, where it's all about Micro Four Thirds lenses.